What happens to a person's face when a stranger accuses them of murder? Can a camera catch something the mouth is trying to hide? And if millions of people watch the same interview and reach the same verdict, what happens when the one qualified person in the room tells them they got it backwards? You have seen the clips. You have seen the freeze frames, the slow motion, the red circles drawn around a young man's mouth. What you have not seen is the full breakdown, unedited, from beginning to end. I have the interview. I have the recording. I have every word the expert spoke before the internet cut her sentence in half. And by the time this episode ends, you will understand why almost everything you were told about that footage was assembled backwards. Before we go further, tap the like button and subscribe to True Crime Victims, because this is the version of the story nobody else is playing for you.
A world-renowned body language expert weighing in on that interview you've probably already seen of the young man who claims that he's Nolan Wells' best friend and was with him on July 4th.
Have anything to do with Nolan's death?
Of course not. Absolutely not.
The only thing is that people would probably pick out is like he didn't say the word no, right? He says, of course not. Okay? So when he's saying that, though, his head is already shaking his head no like a second before he actually answers it.
It's a fascinating interview you don't want to miss. Plus an update on this fast-moving case at the end of this jury consultant, speaker, author, and body language expert. Thank you for being on the program as we dive into the Nolan Wells case.
I'm happy to be here, Matt. Let's talk about this case. There's lots of information here that we need to talk about today.
Yeah, so we have Warren Hudson, who is a friend of Nolan Wells, and they were on the boat together initially. And he recently did an interview with Brandon Tatum from the Officer Tatum show. So I want to play some clips from that, and I'm going to get straight to it because one of the main questions that he's asked is, did you have anything to do with the death of this young man?
Have anything to do with Nolan's death?
Of course not. Absolutely not.
Okay, it's a short clip. Obviously, this is part of a much larger interview. If people want to check it out, they can watch it on the Officer Tatum show. But anything stick out to you from this clip?
Okay, so I want to run this by us. I want you to look at his body language before he was asked the question, while he was asking the question, and while he was responding to the question. So this is where we talk about the 7-second scan. Right? There is no difference from the minute before the question was asked, during the question, or after the question. It remained the same. So that is what we call that's his norm, right? So when I'm looking for is any sort of deviation from that, the only thing is that people would probably pick out is like he didn't say the word no, right? He says, of course not. Okay? So when he's saying that, though, his head is already shaking his head no like a second before he actually answers it. What I'd be looking for, if it was deceptive, it would happen afterwards. He would say, of course not. See? He doesn't. He says, of course not. It happens before. It's because he already knows the truth. So in this particular clip right here, there's no deceptive indicator. And I want you to demystify the fact that he says, of course not. And you'll see that in other clips, he says that's his answer to no, right? So that is what his baseline is. So this is really important because when a person deviates, they may switch it up. They'll say, of course, no, but then let's see how they answer all the other questions. So let's take a look at the other ones.
Yeah, so here he's asked the pointed question whether or not he killed the young man.
Did you kill Nolan?
Of course not.
Of course. And again, of course not. That is his norm. That's how he answers the question because he finds it's like, of course I wouldn't. That's preposterous. That's unbelievable. I can't believe you asked that question. So we have to, when we're looking at deception, we're looking at verbal dictionary, how they use their words. When you look at just that phrase, it's not enough to decide deception. It's not a cluster. So what would be a cluster would be someone that maybe had leaned forward, leaned back, then maybe he would have sniffed, and then he would have shrugged his shoulders, okay? That didn't happen. There was no difference in his body language. It was just, if you look at his body language before, during, and after, there was still no deception indicated.
So here's another clip from that same interview where he's asked about the phone, and the phone has really, this is Nolan Wells' phone, right? So it was allegedly left on the boat, and and in this interview, Warren says everyone kind of leaves their phones on the boat because the water is gross, murky. You grab it, you take pictures on the boat, you may leave it behind. Then there's been questions as to whether or not the phone has been tampered with. Because remember, again, there's a lot of people that question the story. There's a lot of people that are still investigating this case. So there's questions about if he even got on the boat, if the phone was taken, and what happened to the phone. He's asked about the phone, and let me play that for you.
They say that you guys deleted stuff out of his phone. Did you delete anything out of Nolan's phone?
No, of course not.
Okay, so that is a problem for me. Okay, when he says, of course not, that was normally his response. Okay, and then you see the sniff, his head tilted to the side. So that to me is going to give me, that's what I call a red flag, right? Those are hot spots. Why? Because I'm seeing more than 2 indicators that are questionable to me. So I'm going to want to probe more. I don't know yet, but I'm going to probe more precisely. But when we see that, that's telling me there is something there. I just don't know what it is yet, because there's no follow-up question there to ask a deeper probe. So what we're looking for is when there's a probe, or that's what we call a stimulus, right? What is a stimulus? That was a pretty high probe. That was a high stake question. Okay, and then what I'm looking for are at least 3 indicators in 2 of the channels, which is your body, your face, psychophysiology, like sniffing, gulping, swallowing, licking the lips, etc. And we do see some of those indicators. So what I'm saying to you, there are some indicators, deceptive indicators, and there is a possible cluster there. So that would tell me as an investigator, and this gentleman is not a real investigator, right? So that's the area I'm going to start to probe and ask more inquiring questions to whittle it down to be more precise. So that was a pretty punchy question, and he was probably prepared for it too. And also the sniff can be like an end of a pointed question, like, of course not, like this. And so like a period at the end of a sentence, right? And also a swallow can be fear, but it also can be he knows the weight of that question, which also causes fear. See how you can see where they can have more than one message. So that's an area I'm going to want to explore.
Yeah, and as we're talking about this case, usually you and I are talking about trial testimony where the camera is on the person the entire time and you have more of the context. I mean, I'm not saying there were parts that were edited out of this interview, but the camera does shift from time to time. And then I can tell by just watching it that there are other people in the room because the host is like making reference to somebody at some point. So there are other things going on. And I just thought, when I was talking with you, we were both saying that this would be an interesting interview to take a look at. But, we have no horse in the race. I know that a lot of people may see things differently, but it's just really interesting given the fact of all your training and what we can see from these clips.
Yeah, and what I do is I look at things objectively. It has absolutely no subjective analysis, period, end of story. In fact, to me, that is utter nonsense, and it's pseudoscience. It's improper, it's unethical, and you never take 1 or 2 cues and go, oh, that person is lying, and there's nothing else. Because the reason being, Matt, and you and I, we've had dinner, we've talked about this before, there are only specific indicators that are proven to be deceptive. Just because somebody moves or shifts or they lick their lips, unless it's associated with a cluster of other proven indicators of deception, then it's not considered, you can't consider it. So, you're right, there is no skin in the game. It doesn't matter. We're looking at this as an objective data. And if you just look at it as data, then you don't have a subjective opinion. There's no emotion attached to it.
Yeah, and now we're going to get back to the story, and the real main crux of it all is, what is the true timeline? Is everyone actually telling the truth? So he's asked about the last time that he saw Nolan, and he says that it was around 3:00. So here's the answer to that.
Time I saw Nolan was 3:00, and Nolan was cradling a girl in his arms, Katie. Katie. And Katie, Nolan was sitting there, and the last time I saw him, I looked at Nolan, and Nolan was like shaking his head, laughing, and I was like, "Dude, you crazy?" I was like just joking with him, and but anyway, Nolan. That was the last time I laid eyes on him. But when we were leaving, obviously, no one is getting left at the island that came with us unless they demanded to,
Okay, so what do you make of that statement and that initial timeline? So he's laying the groundwork. Last time I saw him was 3 p.m.
Yeah, well, first of all, 3 is the number one lying number. I don't know. We've talked about that before too. So just be careful when they say 3:00, 3:30, 3 people, 3 drinks. And, just that doesn't mean it always is. But we have found in research oftentimes, if they can't pinpoint, the evidence doesn't prove it was actually 3:00. Just be careful, and your antlers should go up when they say 3:00. Why did he say 3:00? We don't know yet. Is he trying to fit it to the story if he was being deceptive? Or maybe it was actually 3:00. So the other thing is what word was really interesting to me is he used the word demanded. So when you think of demanded, that is like a very forceful word. No one demanded. Instead of saying no one asked him, that would have been much more believable than to say, no one demanded. So what he's doing is he's actually heightening it to being more of a command. So the question is, why does he feel the need to use the word demanded? Now, he's not saying that he demanded. He's saying no one demanded. So somewhere in maybe all of this investigation, somewhere he felt that he needed to inject this word. No one demanded it. It was like free will, right? You had the choice, getting on and getting off. But why he chose that word, I'm going to explore a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I'm going to play another part a little bit further in this same line of questioning. He kind of explains more about his timeline as to what happened and really trying to get, as he says, Nolan on the boat.
A lot of people ride out there with someone and in with somebody else all the time. I've done that 100 times. It's a very common thing, but Nolan was sitting by the boat with that Katie girl, and my buddy yelled for Nolan, get on the boat. We're leaving. The boat's having issues. And no, he didn't say that, but he was panicking. Nolan, get the F on the boat. Get on the boat. And Nolan said, no, I'm staying out here. I'm going to ride in with somebody else. And it's not uncommon to hear, but it's not like my buddy asked him one time. My buddy asked Nolan multiple times to get on the boat. Nolan, get on the boat. Get on the boat. We're leaving. If you're coming, you got to come now. And Nolan made a decision to stay out on the island.
Yeah, first of all, remember that word demanded popped up, and then he said yelled. All right, yelled is when you are giving a command, right? And then he comes back and he says, he tries to present it in a little bit different way, like nobody was panicking. Well, yes, they were, because you used the word demanded before, then you use the word yelled. That tells me there's some sort of heightened emotion. So it is my professional opinion that someone or whoever did yell and demanded him to get on the boat, like, get on this boat. Now, the boat is sinking. But for whatever reason, he felt like he wanted to inject the fact that nobody was panicking. So why he felt that there was a need to qualify that is interesting to explore, because he said he yelled at him multiple times. He's trying to make a point of it wasn't just one time, it wasn't 2 times, but we didn't demand him to come on it. He had his own free will, and we asked him over and over and over again. And I'm certain that there was some sort of frustration that happened of the annoyance because he did not do it. So I mean, did not jump on the boat when he was supposed to. So you could see his foot kind of jiggle a little bit. So that's kind of showing you like cognitive load, a little anxiety, a little irritation. So I'm kind of watching that, and also his fluency of the story is a little bit jagged, right? So real stories, just so you know, are true stories are jagged. So oftentimes it will kind of go back up, go forward, and go off to the side. What we're looking for in deceptive language or deceptive behavior is when it's super linear. I mean, this happened, then that happened, and then next after that, and then after that, and then after that, and then after that. So they're literally kind of pulling you, right, along with a rope, like in every step of the way. That's a deceptive indicator. But you're not really seeing that here. But I do think he's trying to cover up the fact that there was some agitation, there was frustration, there was yelling, get on the boat, there was a panic. I don't believe the other part of it, but I don't know why he felt the need to have to over-explain or diminish the fact that there was no panic. So I'm not into his head. And again, these are questions to follow up with. And like you said earlier, Matt, is, you know, we didn't see the whole interview, right? We didn't see the whole interview. So with that being said, we are looking at, when I'm looking at it, you can't just take a clip and go, oh, unless that's really obvious, okay? And I've done that and called it out pretty quick. You've got to find a baseline. And I did look up at the interview, by the way, so that I could have a baseline to be able to tell you and share with your viewers what I saw based on what I already knew in the baseline. So when it was off, then I know where the deviation is. And that's where it's interesting how to detect deception.
Yeah, and it's all to do with the timeline and, you know, what in fact is the true timeline, because he says that he didn't see, he saw him last around 3 o'clock. We're going to get to the phone call to Cito that takes place at 4. And maybe some of the chaos is they've already realized there's problems with the boat. Maybe it is, in fact, someone got into a fight, like some people are saying, and they all want to leave. But actually, let me play part of that dispatch call and get your take on this. And again, this is just part of the dispatch call.
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership. Yeah.
All right. Is the boat sinking or you have it aground?
We were sinking, yes.
Is it aground is the question?
No, we're not aground. We are in 17 foot of water. We're in 31 foot of water.
All right, have to ask. What do you want to do? Do you want to be towed back?
I want to get this boat unsank and towed back, yes. There are 0 adults on board.
There's nobody on board the boat?
No. Nobody here is over the age of 21.
All right. And is everybody on board in good health otherwise?
Yeah, everybody's
How many?
board.
All right. Do you need the United States Coast Guard?
What?
Do you need the United States Coast Guard?
No, we do not need that.
And also, you know, for the viewer, there was a lot of dead air in this Q&A with this lady that was trying to help them. So it is also edited. You can listen to it online, the full thing. But that's the gist that stood out to me that I wanted to get your take on.
There is a sense of urgency, but not in a form of high panic. It's not to that level. So this is like, we're concerned. His voice is a little bit more tense. You know, you can sense the tenseness in his voice. And what I would like to do, and I think this would be really great for this 911 call, is run it through voice stress analysis. And voice stress analysis will be able to tell you exactly in the markers of where that person is deviating. The other thing is he uses the word 31 feet, right? It starts at 17.
Another 3.
To the 31. So it's really interesting about how the mind works, and just kind of give you a little background on it, because there's a lot of research that was done in this, and Dr. James Pennebaker did this research, and they found that oftentimes people that are being deceptive, or they're trying to, you know, fluff over certain timelines or whatever, they default to 3. they found that often with police statements over and over and over again, that number 3 pops up every time. So that is a big question for me. Every time I see 3, I go, why did he say 31? Well, he first started at 17 to 31. So did he have I've been on a fishing boat many times, love to fish, and we do have those fish finders, and you wouldn't believe that, would you, Matt, that I was a fisher? I'm a fisherwoman. But anyway, 31 feet. How did they know that? Did they have the apparatus or the machine that was on their boat to be able to say, where they were and how deep they were? So these are all these questions. So, but to kind of crystallize everything, the number 3 is going to be a question for me. Why did he say that? He changed it for 17 to 31. Did somebody else in the background say, no, it's 31 and he thought it was 17? We need to clarify that. There was urgency, but it wasn't panic. That was in his voice. Yes, they were slurred. But the other thing is at the very end, he had asked about a Coast Guard, and then he had asked the question. He didn't understand it. So did he not hear the question, or was that what we call repeated assertion? So there's this, we always look for when somebody asks a question, and then do they repeat it? It's kind of buying time. So these are the questions I'm going to be asking.
Initially, it sounds like he didn't need help, didn't want the Coast Guard called. Everyone was okay on board. But then again, it's a longer call. It does sound a little chaotic. People, other outlets are describing it as, quote, frantic. I didn't hear frantic.
I didn't say it was not frantic. That is not frantic. In fact, you would have heard the voice pitch. Frantic is your voice will pitch, not lower. His was higher in volume, but it wasn't a shrill or a pitch. That's when someone becomes frantic, like, oh my God, your voice will pitch higher, become more frantic. So you've got tone, pitch, and volume. The volume was louder, the tone was a little stronger, but the pitch was not higher.
Because he sounded drunk and annoyed. Yeah. There's one final clip that I want to get your take on. Again, this is from the same podcast with Brandon Tatum. And this is basically of this Warren Hudson talking about the reason why he didn't go to the funeral. So let me play that.
I would never want to take the attention off of Nolan and his family. They don't deserve that. And, for own personal reasons, I mean, I've gotten thousands of death threats. My family's got thousands of death threats. And, for my own safety, I'm not going to put my own health and safety at risk. It breaks my heart that I can't go, and it hurt me more than anything because, obviously I want to say my last goodbyes to one of my best friends. But I mean, if I'm getting thousands of death threats of people saying they're going to kill me and do crazy things to my family and I couldn't bring myself to go because, I got to put my own safety first. And even if that means, missing my friend's funeral, I mean, it's horrible and I wish I could have been there, but that's what's been going on,
So what's your take on that?
So when there is a true situation, emotion always happens at the end. Okay. So if I would take in that piece and I could underline every emotion word out of it, it was consistent all the way through. It breaks my heart. It was horrible. He really wanted to be there. Right. So, and it really bothered him that he couldn't, and I'm paraphrasing. It was something that he was really upset about, but then he explains why. He explains, which was plausible. I've been getting a lot of death threats. And then you have to think about, well, is that true? Or is he just saying that? Is it plausible that he did get a lot of death threats? And only would you know is if you looked at the emails, the phone calls, and text messages, whether he did or not. I believe that he did get a lot of death threats. I do think that he wanted to be there, but he couldn't. He had to make the decision. I want to go there. It's horrible. This is his best friend. And it breaks his heart. I mean, people that are innocent don't use those words. They just don't. They can't connect with the emotion. They just don't. There is a disconnect. there is a coldness or coolness, or they skip over it and they can't really speak to it. But multiple times he said it. So I believe him. I think that what he said was absolutely 100% truthful.
All right. Well, I certainly appreciate your thoughts.
What happened on Horn Island on July 4th, 2026. Joining us today to help us better understand the behavior of those closest to the case is Elliot Connie. Yeah, Elliot is a psychotherapist. Yeah, man, we about to get down to the nitty-gritty. What's up, Elliot?
What's happening, Willie? How you doing?
Oh, man, I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. But otherwise, man, it's going down around here, man. There's a lot of people out here involved in this Nolan Wells case moving funny, man. They moving funny. Now, listen, family. Elliot is not here to determine guilt. That's already been determined. He's here to better help us understand the actions of the people involved, the actions and the communication of those involved, right? So, Elliot, you saw the Warren Hudson interview, and I saw your comments. I heard your comments about that interview and what you thought of Warren and his answers and his behavior, his expressions, his disposition. Can you share your thoughts with our audience?
Yeah, I mean, somebody sent me the video, and to be honest, man, I did not intend to be following this story as closely as I've ended up following the story. But my heart goes out to this family. My heart goes out to this kid. And somebody sent me the video that was done of the Warren kid doing the interview. And as a practicing psychotherapist, I've been a practicing psychotherapist for almost 20 years. I've worked with literally thousands of people that are struggling with grief and loss issues. And while it's true, every human being processes loss and every human being does grief differently, it is also true that there are some pretty commonality things that you look for that let you know that someone is appropriately handling a loss and dealing with a loss and experiencing a loss. And some of the things that stood out to me were just, I mean, quite frankly, alarming. Now, to be honest with you, I have no earthly idea what the truth is. I'm just as lost as everybody else. But there are certain things I would confidently say based upon my clinical experience. Number one, that interview was rehearsed and scripted. And you could tell because he was repeating phrases. Like, think about an athlete, for example, when they get interviewed for a press conference and they have PR people who work for the whatever team they play for. They will tell them, make sure you get these points out. Regardless what the interviewer is asking, make sure you get these points out. It was clear to me that he had been coached to say how close he was to Nolan, because he repeatedly referred to Nolan as my brother.
And best friend.
And best friend. It was like the theme he was trying to get out. Nolan and I are very, very close. It was also very clear to me that he had been coached to explain the damage to the boat, because he had like extraordinary level of detail about that boat. And if you think back to when you were 18, when I had a car, my first car when I was 18, the car broke down, and like if someone said, what happened to your car? I don't know, the thing broke. But he was like, the bilge was doing this and doing this and doing this. Like, so that stood out to me. The other thing that stood out to me was the absolute absence of emotion, which again, everybody does grief differently, but to lose someone that you have repeatedly referred to as your best friend and brother, to lose someone like that just 2 weeks ago, the funeral that you did not attend was just 2 days prior. And you are talking about this with absolutely no emotion. That is absolutely weird. Now, when I talk about emotion, people need to really understand what I mean. And I'm talking about any emotion. He should, even if he's completely innocent, he should have the emotion of I hate that I'm sitting in these accusations and couldn't go to the funeral. My best friend and brother was buried yesterday, and I didn't want to make it uncomfortable for the family, so I didn't go to the funeral, and I'm broken up about it. He did not say that. He did not say, I'm missing him. And if you think about the level of loss, it's not just losing my best friend and brother. He was very clear. We went to elementary school, middle school, high school together, and even in our first year of college, we continue to talk. So it's not just losing a friend, it's losing someone that's a part of your daily life. So he should have said things like, man, I wake up and I look to my phone expecting a text from him and I haven't gotten that text. Like, that's how you experience loss. He didn't say any of that, which of course is very, very unusual. And maybe the biggest tell, the most concerning thing, I shouldn't call it tell, because I honestly, I don't know what this person is guilty of, but I would bet a lot of money that he's hiding something. He knows something that he's been coached not to say. Maybe there was an accidental death and they don't want him talking about it. Maybe, who knows what, but something he's hiding. And I would bet my clinical professionhood on the fact that he's hiding something. And the most alarming thing was, the interview was released in segments. And one of the segments, the interviewer, whose name I don't want to say because I don't support the person, but
right.
The interviewer brought this person to the actual coast, to the actual island, which at minimum is the last place he saw his best friend. At minimum. At maximum, the place where he witnessed some sort of action or even participated in some sort of action that led to his death. And you went to that exact same spot and you were not triggered in any way, shape, or form. That is psychologically incredibly unusual. To go back to the scene where the last place you saw your best friend, that is absolutely unusual. And I cannot tell you, that just speaking as a clinician, I cannot tell you how many times you do therapy with someone and the parents of a lost child say things like, I can't go into my child's room. They'll say something like, it's been 2 years, I haven't even touched the room. A sibling will say, I haven't gone into my sibling's room. No one has touched the car. They say these things because I know people that, like, they've lost somebody in a car accident and they no longer will drive on the road because they don't want to drive past the place where their loved one was deceased. And 2 weeks after losing this person, you are standing at the spot which at minimum is the last place you saw your best friend. That is psychologically very, very odd. And then the last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up because I'm probably talking too much. But the last
you valid. You know, you're on point.
The last thing I'll say is, if you watch that interview, and I watched everything everything I get my hands on. Maybe there's stuff I missed, but I watch everything I get my hands on. The last thing I'll say is every word Warren said laid all of the blame on Nolan. He, like, for example, he said Nolan was drinking. He didn't say we were drinking. He said Nolan wanted to stay on the island. He didn't say we shouldn't have let him stay on the island alone. So, like, there was no expression of remorse. Like, man, if I can go back in time, I would have said, maybe we don't need to drink today, guys. Or if I can go back in time, I would have fought even harder for Nolan to come home with us. Or I would have said, look, we're a group of 4. How about 2 of us go with the boat and one of us stay with Nolan? Like, but there was no expression of responsibility on his part whatsoever. That's incredibly odd, because even if it's 100% not your fault, a lot of people will say things like, I wish I could have done more. I wish I had answered that phone call when they called me. I wish I didn't have a headache that night and I had gone out with them. Maybe I could have changed the outcome. He didn't talk about any absolutes of changing the outcome even once. And that's very, very odd. That's very strange. You lost your best friend and you have no ability to be like, if I can go back in time, maybe if we'd arrived 10 minutes earlier, 10 minutes later, maybe if my mom had told me the boat was damaged, we never would have been taking it. Man, I wish I could have stopped him from hanging out with that girl. He doesn't say any of that. Now, again, does that mean he's guilty of murder? No, I don't know what happened there, and I can't say that I do know. But I would. There are some red flags that tell me he is hiding something, and he was coached in the interview to do it. And they found an interviewer that would not push. They did not find a valid journalist. They did not find, Nancy Grace or Geraldo Rivera. They didn't find a journalist that would actually do journalistic work or do journalistic questioning. They found an internet personality that would help him spin the narrative the way he needed to spin it. And that choice in and of itself, it's just psychologically odd.
Yeah, they found somebody who actually had a narrative already, and so he walked him into the narrative that he had already created for himself. So all they did, he was basically Buddy's support, what he calls support blanket. That's basically what it was. It was a very, very softball interview. What do you think about? How do you interpret the communication style of Warren?
I mean, that's hard to say because I don't know him personally, but I can say the communication style of Warren in that moment just struck me as odd. So here's an example, right? So clinically, we get trained to read more than just words. It was very unusual that his tone never really changed. It was very unusual that the pace at which he spoke never really changed. If you go back and watch the video, he's distant. He's sitting back distant from the interviewer. Now, we know non-verbally that you will sometimes distance yourself from topics you don't feel comfortable talking about. So something about that conversation was making him uncomfortable. So the point that where you physically try to remove yourself from the conversation as if it is a tangible thing. Those are things that we notice as clinicians that just tell you this is an unusual communication pattern. His voice never fluctuated. And so I'm going to get super nerdy and technical here. When you get in a high stress environment, your body releases a chemical called cortisol. And that will it's like that fight or flight thing. And all of you you've had that moment where it's like adrenaline is flowing through your body and cortisol is flowing through your body. And that will make your heart race. That will make your palms sweat. It will change how you're communicating in real time. It'll change the pace at which you talk. It'll change the tone, your volume of voice. None of that changed over an elongated period of time. Like you can talk at a similar point for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but we're talking a 30-minute clip, and he's just that's
you're really good, man, because I already before I could even ask you the question, you've answered about 3 of my questions, man. Because I did want to ask you about stress. I wanted to ask you if you thought that grief, fear, or stress could change the way a person tells a story.
For sure. Yes.
Yeah. So, but you didn't sense that changed anything about Warren's story, because you felt like in your mind, Warren's whole story was rehearsed. It didn't matter what questions was asked. He already had the script.
I feel like Warren's whole story was rehearsed. I feel like they picked an interviewer that will help him get out the rehearsed story. And I knew as I was watching that this is not the whole story. Something in here is incomplete or inaccurate. I don't know what it is, but something in here is incomplete and or inaccurate.
Well, what do you think about the friends choosing to remain silent and lawyer up?
I have mixed feelings about it. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. If I had an 18-year-old child who I was convinced was completely innocent, and I felt like the whole world thinks my child is guilty, I would probably also hire an attorney, and I would probably also want to protect my child. I love my child. I want to make sure my child does not end up in the justice system and end up being held accountable for a crime that I, as the parent, don't believe they committed. But there's a moral part of this and the moral part of this is none of those kids are behaving like someone that loves Nolan and his family. None of those kids have gone by the house, hugged the mom and dad. Like, none of those kids have been according to the parents, they haven't been in contact with those kids in any way, shape, or form. And so that should eat you up. Like, so when you do, all right, I'm gonna be super nerdy again. You gotta apologize. I gotta apologize.
Hey man, that's what I got you for, man. That's why you're on here. You know, the nerdy stuff is the good stuff.
All right, I got a hip hop part of my brain. I got a nerdy part of my brain. So a lot of people don't know how lie detectors work. Now, the way lie detectors work is they don't actually detect whether you're telling the truth or not. What they detect are stress markers that happen in your body when you behave or say something incongruent. Because incongruencies should hurt you. So, for example, if I say I love you, it should be difficult for me to watch you be sick. Right? So if you have a loved one and they got the flu, you should be like, gosh, it's so hard for me to watch you sick. Because the fact that I can't do anything, your body experiences as an incongruence, and you struggle with that. And your stress markers go up. And then, like, a lie detector test would notice that. So when you see that thing going off with a lie detector, is not detecting whether the person is lying and telling the truth. It's detecting the presence of stress markers. So they should be struggling to sleep. They should be not eating or eating a lot. They should be, like, one of the things that stood out to me, I don't know what this means, but it stood out to me, is Warren was incredibly well groomed. Like, these things, like, if I lost my best friend, I'm not going to the barbershop. I'm not even thinking about it because my heart and mind would be totally focused on that. And that didn't seem to be the case here. So I, as a clinician, I look for the presence of stress and then help the person deal with stress. And he didn't seem to be showing a lot of presence of stress.
How might the silence affect Nolan's family, psychologically?
Betrayal. If I genuinely believe that Nolan was with friends, and on some level they must have believed it, which is why they were all comfortable with him hanging out with these kids, I would feel abandoned, I would feel betrayed, and I would feel very much, especially given that Warren's mother is a judge, I would feel like the system is working against me when all I want is the truth.
What about the limited communication with law enforcement to the family? How does that affect the family?
Well,
how might it affect the family?
That's actually not super duper uncommon. So a lot of families complain about when they're the victims of a crime. They always talk about how I haven't talked to the sheriff, I haven't talked to the detective, I haven't talked to the DA. That's actually not very uncommon because oftentimes the sheriff, the DA, the prosecuting attorneys, they will have strategic reasons as to why they're not giving certain information to the families. So the family usually feels like there's some sort of secret going on that is making it hard. But just because the law enforcement isn't talking to the family, that does not mean anything nefarious is happening, because that's actually not a super uncommon thing.
Yeah, but the thing is that, it makes people question the law enforcement's motives when they go dark. It's one thing for you not to tell me everything you know, but it's another thing when you go dark or you tell me, don't call my phone again. I've heard grieving families say that investigators have told them, don't call me again.
Right.
Yeah. So I think the biggest part is like when you're calling them and you're calling and they're not calling back, or they kick the can down to the next guy for you to talk to that person. And then that person takes a week or 2 weeks to call you back. You calling and they steadily kicking the can down the road, I think that can affect somebody big time. So,
100% is going to affect it big time, because if I were the parents, I would be wondering, are you talking to the judge? Like, if you're not talking to me, are you talking to these other families? But it could be the case that they're just going silent to build a case. I don't know. But if I were those families, I would be living in absolute fear right now.
Yeah. I'll say when I'm not listening, when they're not calling me, if I'm on the family side, if I'm calling and I'm calling, they're not calling me back. I mean, just a courtesy call, show some respect, man. You got to grieve the family. Just out of respect, pick up the damn phone and say, I got your message. Or send a text message, say, I got you. We work on, look for a call from me next week. I got it, man. Ain't nobody in your family dead. I got it. Your family member didn't die. I got it. But have some damn empathy, bro, for the people on the other side, and put yourself in their shoes. But it just appears to me that law enforcement oftentimes, especially in cases like this, they go dark, man, because they don't want to solve the crime.
Well, to your point, here's the thought that scares me the most. If Nolan goes missing and there's no social media, there's no Tyler Perry, there's no Al Sharpton, and there's no Colin Kaepernick, all who donated money, and that money was being able to be used to pay for the funeral, to pay for independent autopsy, and to pay for an attorney. Like, we would never hear about this. And this family would only be dependent upon the law enforcement that is not really talking to them and doesn't seem to be treating this as if it's an urgent situation. So think about, to me, that's the scariest part of this whole story. It just so happens that social media has created a groundswell of attention, making it so that law enforcement couldn't ignore it if they were desirous of doing so. And then you have people like Colin Kaepernick saying, I will pay for an independent funeral, which included a flight to Washington, D.C., and then the medical examiner's cost and all that. And then you have Al Sharpton donating money so they can afford an attorney like Ben Crump. And then you have, I don't remember who else, Tyler Perry stepped up and offered a reward. I think the reward money is now up to $125,000 for anyone that provides information that leads to the truth of what happened with Nolan. But if none of that happens, this family is literally living in silence. So to me, that's the scarier question. I actually have, this is going to be a weird way to word this, but I have increased confidence in law enforcement because of the social pressure that currently exists. It'll be harder for them to ignore given the spotlight that is currently on them and doing their job. Not impossible, but it's harder for them to ignore given how big of a spotlight this is.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I agree with that. A family, that there are other cases out there that's just like this. I mean, eerily similar cases.
Yes.
It's crazy how many of these cases have been popping up over the last years. So many people looking for answers. Their loved ones have come up mysteriously dead, especially ones who have been hanging out with their so-called friends or may have had some type of negative encounter with law enforcement and they come up missing. And it's not just black people, not black people overwhelmingly, but it's not just black people that this is happening to. So this is a crisis right now. There's a crisis, and I think one of the biggest problems is that justice is not being served. If justice was being served, that could be a major deterrent. But justice is not being served, and I think that is because it's not just because of incompetence, lack of resources. It is lack of interest, and it's also, I believe, that many times members of law enforcement are also culpable in these type of situations. But that's just my thoughts.
Could be,
absolutely. So, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank Elliot Connie for joining us. And how can people follow you if they want to check you out on social media?
Man, go to Instagram or Facebook, and either search my name, Elliot Connie, 2 L's and 2 T's, or at Elliot Speaks. That's how you can find me. And I will be posting about this story because I think we all have a responsibility to keep this young man's name in the public, because that provides the pressure for the wheels of justice to continue to turn. And I will continue to do that until the truth comes out.
Ladies and gentlemen, Elliot Connie.
Thank you all. Thank you for help, Willie.
Absolutely.